3,000 years ago, in the heart of ancient Egypt, something was buried so deeply, so deliberately, that it was never meant to be found, not by kings, not by priests, not even by time itself, because this was not simply a tomb built to honor the dead. It was something else entirely, something far darker, a place created not to preserve a legacy, but to imprison a truth that history itself tried to erase. And yet, no matter how carefully something is hidden, time always leaves behind traces. And it was one of those traces that led a modern team of archaeologists to a discovery that would change everything. The kind of discovery that should have remained buried forever. The kind that comes with a warning that no one hears until it is already too late. And under the scorching Egyptian sun, surrounded by endless waves of sand, the team uncovered a sealed structure unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was not marked on any map, not mentioned in any ancient record, and yet it existed, perfectly preserved beneath layers of time, as if the desert itself had been guarding it, protecting it from the outside world. And when they first stood before its entrance, there was a silence that felt unnatural, a stillness that did not belong in a place touched by the wind. But they ignored it, because curiosity has always been stronger than instinct, and discovery has always been more important than fear. And the entrance itself was strange. There were no royal symbols, no golden inscriptions, no signs of honor or remembrance. Instead, there were markings, symbols carved deeply into the stone, repeating again and again, not as decoration, but as reinforcement, like a warning carved so many times that it became impossible to miss. And yet they did not understand it, not yet, and so they prepared to open it, carefully, methodically, just like every excavation they had ever done before. But the moment the seal cracked, the air changed, the wind outside seemed to disappear, the desert fell into a silence so deep it felt unnatural, and when the entrance finally opened, a rush of ancient air escaped, dry and sharp, carrying with it a smell that was not just decay, but something preserved, something that had remained untouched for far too long. And as they stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, the walls began to reveal themselves, covered in carvings, but not the kind they expected. There were no gods, no afterlife journeys, no stories of glory or power. Instead, there were images of fear, of struggle, of something being held down, restrained, contained, figures bound by symbols that looked more like seals than decoration. And the deeper they went, the more unsettling it became, because these carvings did not tell a story of death, they told a story of imprisonment. And one of the archaeologists said it quietly, almost without thinking, that this was not a tomb, it was a prison. And at the center of that prison, they found it, the sarcophagus, massive, perfectly preserved, standing alone as if it was the only thing that mattered. Its surface smooth but covered in the same repeating symbols, and yet there was something missing, something that every burial in ancient Egypt always had, a name, an identity, a record of who was inside. But this one had none, no inscription, no title, nothing, as if whoever was inside had been erased completely from history, and the silence around it was overwhelming, heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that presses against your mind, the kind that makes your thoughts louder. And yet they continued, because by that point, turning back was no longer an option. And slowly, carefully, inch by inch, they began to open the sarcophagus, the grinding sound of stone echoing through the chamber, stretching unnaturally, and then suddenly, and slowly, carefully, inch by inch, they began to open the sarcophagus, the grinding sound of stone echoing through the chamber, stretching unnaturally, and then suddenly, it stopped, not because they had finished, but because something inside moved. And in that moment, every single one of them froze, not because they understood what had happened, but because their bodies reacted before their minds could catch up. Because there are certain moments when instinct speaks louder than logic, and this was one of them. The kind of moment where something deep inside you tells you that something is wrong. Something is very wrong, and yet your mind refuses to accept it, refuses to process it, refuses to believe that what just happened could be real. And so they stood there in silence, staring at each other, waiting for someone to say something, anything, that could bring them back to reality. But no one spoke, because there are no words for something that should not exist. And then it happened again, this time clearer, more defined, a faint movement from inside the sarcophagus, a subtle shift that could no longer be ignored. And that was when one of them dropped their flashlight, the beam hitting the ground and rolling across the stone floor, casting moving shadows across the walls, before finally stopping at an angle that sent a flickering light directly into the open sarcophagus. And that was when they saw her, the queen, lying perfectly still, perfectly preserved, her body untouched by time, her features still visible beneath the centuries that should have destroyed her. And for a moment, everything seemed normal, everything seemed still. Because the human mind can only deny reality for so long before it is forced to accept it. And this was the moment when denial was no longer possible. One of them stumbled backward, their hands shaking, their movements rushed and uneven, the grinding sound of stone returning, louder this time, more desperate, as if they were not just sealing a tomb, but trying to contain something that should never have been disturbed. They did not stop. They turned and ran, out of the chamber, through the carved walls that now felt less like history and more like a warning. And when they finally stepped back into the sunlight, the world outside felt wrong, the brightness too intense, the air too normal, as if reality itself had not caught up with what had just happened. And they stood there, trying to breathe. Maybe it was trapped gases. Maybe it was pressure changes. Maybe it was a trick of light, a coincidence, a misinterpretation, anything but the truth, because the truth was something they were not ready to face, something they were not willing to accept, and yet deep down, beneath all the explanations and theories, even after they left the site, even after they tried to move on, because some experiences do not fade, they do not disappear, they stay with you, quietly, persistently, reminding you that what you saw was real, and within days, news of the discovery began to spread, but not the truth, not the full story, only a control version. A carefully edited explanation that described the site as a remarkable preservation case. Nothing more, nothing unusual, just another discovery in the long history of ancient Egypt. But internally, everything had changed. The site was immediately sealed, restricted, guarded, access limited to only a small group of researchers, and even within that group, information was controlled, monitored, filtered, because what they had found was not something that could be explained easily, and the more they studied it, the more unsettling it became. Scans revealed that the body inside the sarcophagus had not decayed in any normal way. Tissues were preserved beyond anything previously recorded. Cells that should have been destroyed by time were still intact, still structured, still present in ways that made no sense. And at first, this was seen as a scientific breakthrough, something extraordinary, something worth studying. But that feeling did not last long, because the deeper they looked, the more they realized that this was not just preservation. This was something else entirely, something that did not belong in the natural world. And then came the discovery that changed everything. And then came the discovery that no one was prepared for. The kind of discovery that shifts everything from curiosity to fear, from science to something far beyond it. Something so small that at first it was dismissed as interference, a glitch in the system, a malfunction that could be explained with a simple adjustment. But when they recalibrated the equipment and ran the scan again, it was still there, a faint signal, minimal, almost undetectable, but consistent. And as they isolated it, studied it, analyzed it further, the realization slowly began to form, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a puzzle that no one wanted to complete. It was not noise. It had a pattern, a rhythm, irregular but present, something that resembled electrical activity, biological activity, the kind of activity that should only exist in living tissue. And yet here it was, coming from a body that had been sealed away for 3,000 years. And at first, no one said it out loud. No one wanted to be the one to give it a name, because naming it would make it real, and reality is something that cannot be undone. And so they searched for explanations, they questioned the equipment, they repeated the scans, they ran tests again and again, hoping that each new attempt would prove the previous one wrong. But it didn't. The signal remained, faint but undeniable, and eventually, someone said it, quietly, almost unwillingly, that whatever was inside that sarcophagus was not entirely dead. And the moment those words were spoken, everything changed. Because science can explain many things, but it is not built to explain something like that. And the debates began. Some insisted it was a malfunction, a misreading, an error in the system. Others refused to even discuss it, choosing instead to avoid the subject entirely, because ignoring something is sometimes easier than facing it. But regardless of what they chose to believe, one thing was clear. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And then the incidents began, small at first, easy to dismiss, easy to ignore. Workers reported hearing sounds at night, faint movements echoing through the sealed chamber, the kind of sounds that could be explained as structural shifts, natural settling, anything but what they felt like, because what they felt like was something moving, something alive, and the reports continued, growing more frequent, more detailed. One guard claimed he saw the sarcophagus lid slightly shifted when he checked the chamber, even though it had been sealed, locked, secured with multiple layers of protection. Another reported hearing a sound that he described as breathing, slow, steady, rhythmic breathing, coming from inside the chamber, and after that, he refused to return, no matter how much they tried to convince him, no matter how much they dismissed his claim. And once that belief takes hold, it does not let go, and slowly, one by one, people began to leave the project. Not because they were fired, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to, willingly, quietly, without explanation, because sometimes the truth is too heavy to carry, and sometimes survival means walking away. And those who stayed tried to maintain control, tried to continue the research, tried to treat it like any other scientific study. But the environment had changed. The atmosphere was different, heavier, more tense, as if something unseen was always present, always watching, and the deeper they went, the the more they realized that this was not just a discovery. It was something far more dangerous, something that should have remained hidden, something that should never have been found. And yet it had been, and now there was no way to undo it, no way to put it back, no way to pretend that it had never happened. And the more they tried to contain it, the more it seemed to resist, not in an obvious way, not in a way that could be easily measured, but in subtle ways, small changes, small movements, small signals that continued to appear, continued to persist, as if something inside was slowly becoming more active, more aware. And that was when the final realization began to take shape, not as a single thought, but as a growing understanding, a quiet truth that no one wanted to admit, but no one could ignore, because if something had been buried for 3,000 years, sealed away with warnings, hidden from history itself, and if it was now showing signs of activity, signs of life, then the real question was not what they had discovered, but why it had been hidden in the first place, slowly, quietly, beyond the reach of those who tried to hide it, because if something was buried 3,000 years ago, hidden from history, sealed with warnings that were never meant to be broken, and if that thing showed signs of life, signs of awareness, signs of something far beyond what should be possible, then maybe the real danger was never the tomb itself. Maybe the real danger was opening it, because some things are not meant to be discovered, some secrets are not meant to be uncovered, and some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again, no matter how hard anyone tries. And if that is true, then the story does not end here. It does not end with the sealing of a chamber or the silence of a report. It continues, somewhere, somehow, in ways that are not yet understood, because whatever was inside that tomb was never just a part of the past. It was something waiting, something patient, something that endured the passage of time without fading, without breaking, without dying. And now that it has been disturbed, now that it has been awakened, even if only slightly, even if only for a moment, the question is no longer what it was, but what it will become, and whether the world is ready to face something that was feared enough to be erased from history itself, because fear like that does not come without reason. And whatever that reason was, it was strong enough to keep it hidden for 3,000 years, and now that silence has been broken, and whatever was sealed away has been touched by the present once again, there is no certainty left, only a quiet, lingering realization that some warnings were never meant to be ignored, and some discoveries were never meant to be made, and whatever lies beneath the sand, whatever waits in the darkness, it is no longer just a story, it is something real, something present, something that should never have been found, and yet it was. And now, the only question that remains is whether it is still contained, or whether something that should have remained buried has already begun to rise again.